Hello everyone, this is Believer and welcome to part 2 of the Rock of Ages playthrough. We're not done with the Spartan theme yet, because it is now time for the Spartans' most famous battle, but first a cutscene.
This is Sparta!
Yeah, okay. Nowadays you cannot really talk about the Spartans without mentioning the Zack Snyder movie 300, based on the comic series of the same name by Frank Miller. To summarize it with one line, it's 300 Spartans defending Greece from the invading army of Persia at the Battle of Thermopylae, holding out until the Greek army has assembled. That's it, that's the movie. It has a lot of memorable quotes, and the visual style is something I really appreciate. I have not read the comics, but it is very clear that it imitates the comics with the colors used in the movie. It almost reminds me of the red and black figure pottery that we know from ancient Greece. The movie itself received mixed reviews, because aside from the glorious visuals, it also had what some people considered inappropriate representation of Persia, and it also was condemned anti-disability because of how King Leonidas rejects the hunchback's request to join the army. I think Frank Miller himself defended his narrative purpose pretty well. The hunchback got rejected because he could not lift his shield high enough to defend the soldier next to him, and was told to go home. It was pretty clear that Leonidas could not use him as a soldier, emphasis on as a soldier, because that is all what Sparta was about. They didn't have democracy at the same level as other Greek communities. It would have been much more classical Spartan of Leonidas to just kick the hunchback off the cliff. When it comes to Persian representation, yeah, I get it that the audience need to be able to tell the bad guys from the good guys, but that giant with swords for hands, yeah, that was a bit too far out for me. Thankfully, we got some good games that have a better Persian representation. Speaking of games, we're playing a game right now, so let's talk less about movies and more about the game. This stage is the first one outside of the tutorial, and it really shows in its simplicity. A more or less straightforward line with two paths. A big one on the ground level with more room for putting defenses, or a smaller path above that requires some decent platforming. I always take the upper road. It's just far less complicated than getting past the big elephant, as long as your platforming is solid. This elephant is a defense unit granted for free to both competitors. Later on, there will be other kinds of defense units like this one. You might have just noticed that I picked up what looks like to be a transparent key. Well, it is because it used to be solid. Those keys are required to access the bosses in this game. Yes, this game actually has bosses. If there's anything I want to praise this stage for, it's how it resembles the hot gates where the battle took place. A very narrow path, and the only way to win is to get past it. The Spartans unclogged this narrow space with 300 soldiers and were able to defend against a much larger army by limiting how many soldiers could fit in the battlefield. So what else is there to say on this real first level? You get an upgraded tower, a stone tower as it were. It does what you would expect it would do. It's more solid than a wooden tower, but it's still just a tower, and for my money, they are remarkably easy to avoid. Now look at this thing right here, it's amazingly stupid. The enemy chose to place the ranged unit in front of the tower. That's not a very common strategy in general warfare. Most people with a brain would place the ranged unit behind the melee unit. If you look up warfare in games 101, first thing you'll see is to place melee units in front of the ranged so they can cover each other. And so we reach the end of King Leonidas. Oh well, he was kinda destined to die anyway. The battle was never meant to be won, but merely to be endured as long as possible. Let's move on to Macedonia.
You shall not pass! Dead!
Wait, that's not how the cutscene goes. One more time.
You shall not pass!
Okay, I'm gonna throw in my 2 cents on this little cutscene and why I made the edit. Maybe it's just me, but the original cutscene manages to ruin the fun by having Justinian reappear and do his blah 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 thing. It just sounds stupid and annoying, and don't get me wrong, stupid and annoying can be fun too, but I've seen it done thousands of times. Obviously this game has a lot of its inspiration from Monty Python, and it would have been much more Python-esque to have the video end immediately after the fun part, so that that moment is the moment we will remember most, and it will be allowed to sink into our consciousness. Gotta end on a high note, guys. My guess is they figured they wanted Gandalf to do his thing. Why Gandalf here, I have no idea, but then they realized that, oh shit, this cutscene is about Justinian, better include him again. Humor really is a science in itself. You might have the best joke in the world, but if you don't know how to deliver it, it's worthless. I'm looking at you, Family Guy. Ah yes, welcome to the Middle Ages. Instead of prospering with philosophy and all that good stuff from Greece, the Middle Ages were all about kings and God. Meet Justinian I, a Byzantine emperor and also a saint among the Eastern Orthodox Christians. Now I'll be honest, prior to this playthrough, and mind you this is not a blind playthrough, I had no idea who this guy was. Turns out he was married to someone I did know about, Theodora, who I learned about from the Civilization games by Sid Meier. A fascinating woman who started out as an actress and prostitute. She eventually got the attention of Justinian I, and because she was so beloved by all, the law was repealed to allow them to be married. She had a long-lasting influence on Justinian, so much so that even after her death, he worked hard to bring peace and harmony between the various religious groups in the city of Byzantium. Although at this time the city had been renamed to Constantinople, named after Constantine the Great. It would then later be renamed to Istanbul after the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of present-time Turkey. So this city has went through a lot. Okay, but what did Justinian himself do? Why is he so important that he was left out of my history books? Well, he was an ambitious man who sought to revive the empire's greatness, but those ambitions were never fully realized. But aside from enriching the Byzantine culture with masterpieces such as Hagia Sophia, he also rewrote Roman law to what is known as Corpus Juris Civilis, a civil law codex, which is still the basis of civil law in many modern states. Since we're running out of time, here are my thoughts on this stage. It's pretty average, with a good number of turns, and it's the first stage to include a shortcut, again mostly for the experienced platformer. You can tell that it's just a little bit harder now, and that the game is starting to pick up its pace now. Here I am, using the Fireball upgrade. This one, contrary to the armor upgrade, is an offensive one, ideal for making the final push. I think that's more or less all for part 2. See you in part 3, where we meet one of the most romanticized persons in history, and also the father of Europe. Bye bye for now.